debates just seem like a circus act, you know? And here we are, the country that broke away from Britain to be free, and now we are the entrapped people.
Yeah, well, you know, they're not doing much better than we are, politically speaking, but I do appreciate how they run their elections. I also enjoy the way Parliament runs. They're a lot less civilized than we are. I think we need to get back to throwing chairs and you know, getting angry and that sort of thing. I think that we have way too much civility on the House floor because we have too much friendship going on. You know, they want us to believe that they're opposing each other when in the background they're actually in agreement working towards the same goal. There's no real difference between our political parties these days. I mean, we're locked, unfortunately, as a whole, we have been locked into a two-party system for so long. And now, politically speaking, maybe not according to their platforms, but the way they operate and the legislation that they create, they're really, really not that different. Yeah. I wrote an article about understanding what the political parties are. And I think this has a lot to do with what we were talking about earlier, about asking the right questions and the ignorance that has overcome America. Most Americans do not realize that political parties are not government entities. They're private corporate clubs. You know, we had this big discussion and big debate over primaries and how the primaries are not fair and that sort of thing. Well, I think that's because most Americans don't realize that primaries are not a civic function. Primaries are a private corporate club choosing who will represent them in the general election, which is the civic function. But we've muddled all of that because we've allowed these private corporate clubs to have access to tax dollars to facilitate their private corporate club elections.
Yeah. Now, what is your opinion, in general, of Rand Paul? He's sort of in the shadows in a way of his father, and but I agree with him like 80% of the time. But sometimes I have a question, and I don't know if because he's playing politics, and he can't alienate everyone, and maybe he's smarter than than his father in a way politically, but the end will be the same. Do you have any opinion on that?
You know, I'm with you. I agree with him sometimes. I don't agree with him sometimes. I really, really was upset with him when he endorsed Mitch McConnell over the more constitutionally sound candidate, and that was obviously a political move, as you said. I have a hard time, and this is just me personally, extending a great deal of respect to people who play the politics game. I have a three-pronged principle: liberty over security, principle over party, truth over personality. And I think that if I were ever elected to office in Washington, D.C., my office would probably be in a broom closet in the basement. My parking space would be 10 miles from the Capitol. If I even made it that far, they didn't assassinate me on the walk there. Because I think it's time for our representatives to start representing us, start representing the Constitution they take an oath to represent, and stop representing political parties and gamesmanship. It's time to stop playing these games and start standing for real things.
Yeah, but haven't we taken the same playbook as all of the dictatorships through the centuries, that if you keep on saying the same thing over and over and over again, people start believing it, and then they start repeating it. They say it constantly, and it becomes a mantra, and it becomes part of their very being, like, we're going to make America great again, or, you know, if we don't kill them there, they'll kill us here. Or, you know, all these stupid sayings, make absolutely no sense. And there are people, there are zombies even in my studio here that work, but they're zombies, and they actually think that way, But it's absolutely amazing to me. It's difficult for me to go to a business meeting and say anything, because every time it seems I say something, it's irritating someone, it's because I'm not mainstream, Republican or Democrat. I think, free market, and these are business people, and they don't get it. That's what scares me.
Well, we talked about this earlier on. It's the miseducation that we have in America, that we've had in America for about 150 years. Some people want to take it back to the 60s. No, it goes way beyond that. We have been teaching error about how our government is supposed to operate for over 100 years now. And so when the scales of deception come across the eyes of the people, truth is a blinding thing. Truth is a very psychologically disturbing thing. And so that's why Liberty First University is so important, because we're not just simply teaching what is out there. We're teaching people how to think, so that they can make these conversations, so they can make these arguments. Every course has an action that goes along with it, things that we can do, things that we need to do. Because if all we're doing is teaching people what to think and not teaching them how to think, that's how we get zombies. And then they get locked into this confirmation bias syndrome, and cognitive dissonance sits in, is what you're experiencing. Don't tell me that. I don't want to hear that. And it really is offensive to the senses to find out that what you've believed to be true for your entire life is simply not true. But that's why we have to be diligent in taking back the narrative and speaking truth. That's the one thing that really disturbs me about conservative media. You have what we call conservative media, what we call liberal media, but they're all running around using the same talking phrases, right, and talking about the same narrative. We need to start ignoring the hysteria and the lies and speaking the truth, so that the light of the truth will defend itself.
Yeah. We hear on all the mainstream news everywhere that, for example, the situation in North Korea today, solving the problem in North Korea is quite simple. But if you mention the real way to resolve the situation in North Korea, they would consider you anti-American. The only way we can solve the problem in North Korea from mainstream media is really to nuke them first before they nuke us, which is insanity, and the whole situation is insane, but no one can see the insanity in the problem that they're creating. Yeah, they have a nuclear missile. Yes, they have nuclear bomb. They have a intercontinental ballistic missile. So what? For every one they have, we have 500. What does that prove? But no one wants to talk to that. They just want to say they want a reason to go to war, because that's where we make our money. I, unfortunately, am not making money on war. I lose money in war. That's why I hate it.
Well, at Liberty First University, what we do is we teach what the designers of our constitutional republic had in mind when they were creating this America, these United States. And it's very interesting when you look at their perspective on foreign relations. Thomas Jefferson and George Washington agreed on this particular aspect, and most of them fell into place in differing degrees. But the primary focus was that this America should be a commerce hub. You see, this is one of the richest resource places that our people had ever seen around the world. All the things they were jockeying for in China and in India and all that, they were finding everything right here. And so Washington said it very well, Jefferson said it very well, that we should be allies to none, so we are enemies to none. We should just simply be a commerce place, so that And Washington went so far to say is as soon as you become an ally with somebody, you're automatically an enemy to someone else. That's right. So if we just keep our trade doors open and treat everyone equally in commerce, then we won't have allies and enemies, and everybody will want to be our friend.
Yeah. But in that way, the politicians don't make so much money, and the citizens do. So that'll never work.
Well, and we still have to have the Navy and the military, because no matter where you go, there's always going to be wicked people who want to take what you have without compromise, without commerce. So you have to have the walls of protection. But our framers never anticipated the continual ongoing war that we are in. As a matter of fact, I was reading up on James Madison's notes in the Federalist Papers about how Congress was supposed to be engaging in taxing and spending. And he spends a lot of time in this in Federalist 45. And most of Federalist 45 is geared to assure those in state government that the federal government can't grow and consume them, that the states will remain independent, sovereign governments because we've established these barriers and these protections. And Madison says near the end of Federalist 45 that the primary function of the federal government is in foreign affairs. Its most power will be derived in war. But since we know that we will be engaged more frequently in peace than we are at war, Madison assured the states that in peace the states had all the power, and that they would hold all the power because war would be a rare thing rather than a frequent thing.
Right, and very few people realize that the power is with the states and not the federal government. That the president himself really has no power at all other than to reject or approve what congressional legislation, and hopefully he disapproves of most of it. But today we look for the president to initiate legislation and for Congress to approve or disapprove it. It's all backwards, and the states are subjugated to the federal government, and that's all upside down and inside out. But that's what people truly believe. They feel like the president isn't doing enough. Every president has done much too much.
Way too much, yes, especially according to the limited nature of our Constitution. I always tell my students, just go look at the Constitution. I don't know if you can see my hands here. Article 1 describes the power delegated to the legislative branch. Article 2 describes the power delegated to the executive branch. And Article 3, which you can barely see here, describes the power delegated to the judiciary. In America, through our constitutional ignorance, we have flipped that upside down so that the judiciary bears the most power, the president then the next, and Congress the least. That was one of the things that we covered in my radio series on the powers of the president. We'll be having a course on that at Liberty First University as well. That the president is not the leader of America, and never was he intended to be. He was the president was created, the executive office was created to be an ambassador on behalf of the states in foreign affairs, and the executive for the laws that Congress creates that are in compliance to the Constitution. The president cannot declare war. He has no power over the military until there is a formal declaration of war, and we haven't had one of those since World War II.
Yeah, well, we don't have to declare war. We just send troops over there in airplanes. In fact, we don't have to do that. We send drones, kill thousands and thousands of people, innocent people, because what I love is a suspected terrorist. And when they say that, I say, whatever happened to that constitutional right of being innocent until proven guilty? Now, can you imagine saying, well, Bob here is suspected of committing a crime. We're going to give him the gas chamber. Well, people would be in uproar, right? Obviously, But yet we can send a drone over to a foreign country, especially in the Middle East, Qatar or Yemen, especially. Carpet bomb a certain neighborhood. Innocent men, women, and children are killed, and Americans will actually say, "Well, there was a suspected terrorist there." They cannot connect the dots.
Well, it's bleeding into America now. We have political prisoners in America now who are incarcerated, federal judges refusing to allow them any bail whatsoever simply because they peacefully protested the unlawful occupation of our state land by the federal government. And we have the Patriot Act being applied on our own soil. We have indefinite detention being applied on our own soil. We have unlimited search and seizure being being applied on our own soil. And it comes from not only the ignorance of the American people as to what their liberties are and where their liberties come from. They don't come from government, they don't come from men, and they don't come from documents. They're an inherent right by the nature of our creation, because we are created in an individual capacity. I am born, and I am not owned by any man. I don't have the power to own any man. And in my individual capacity, government can't have any power over me than I have over another person. And so these are the fundamental principles that we're missing out on, and we're having these things happen to us because the American people are ignorant of their rights, and it's also a direct correlation with this unlawful expansion of judicial power. The judiciary has decided for decades now that if the government can prove what they call a compelling governmental interest, that anything that the government does can override our rights as long as they have a compelling governmental interest. So your right to be secure in your person's house's papers and effects is not really a right if the government can prove there's a national security interest that overrides that. And because of our own ignorance, we've acquiesced to this. We are in compliance with this on a daily basis. We have allowed the government to take away something that is ours inherently, something they don't have the real authority to take away, but we have relinquished it in our ignorance. Samuel Adams said this. He said, "No people will tamely surrender their liberties nor be easily subdued when knowledge is diffused and virtue is preserved."
Right.
He said, "But on the contrary, when the people are universally ignorant and debauched in their manners, they will sink underneath their own weight without the aid of foreign invaders." Americans don't realize that we have lost more liberty with the actions of Washington, D.C. than any foreign enemy could dream in their imaginations.
I would never have thought that I could watch Russian television, that is Russia, it's RT America, Russian television America, and they're all Americans that are, who man the station and give the news, that talk more about liberty, libertarianism, freedom, the Constitution on that station. And here we are, Russian television, talking about the free market and how the only thing works is the free market and government intervention is bad on Russian television, but yet they won't allow that on American television. Now, it baffles my mind that I have to watch Russian television to find out generally what's going on.
I think things are beginning to change a little bit. Maybe, obviously not in the mainstream media where all the money is,
right,
but we are actually making inways in other avenues. There's greater cable presence and we, like we said, we have Liberty First University for the first time in 7 years. I have been on C-SPAN twice now. C-SPAN covered my course on state sovereignty from my book Sovereign Duty. So C-SPAN has a channel called Book TV. Right. And they first contacted me to cover my book Sovereign Duty, and they actually came on site and filmed one of my classes on state sovereignty. Wonderful. And they're still running it on C-SPAN. And then August 6th, just this past August 6th, they had me on their in-depth program, which was a 3-hour in-depth interview. They only gave me one bathroom break in 3 hours. Where we sat and talked for 3 hours about the things that you and I are talking about, people calling in with questions. And so we're seeing this, and I want to encourage everybody. We as a whole need to become better attached with the knowledge that Samuel Adams is talking about, like the knowledge that Liberty First University puts forward and the knowledge that you bring in this show, so that we can have a boldness to stand up in public no matter where we are and speak this truth. Because I believe, and it's hard for me not to get really excited about this, but I really, really believe that we are making progress in changing back the narrative. I have been put on the Southern Poverty Law Center's list of anti-government extremist hate groups. I've been on there for 2 years. I'm the only individual on the group. They have 997 groups and me as an individual. I'm not a big money maker. I get accused of being funded by the Koch brothers. I get accused of being funded by George Soros. I get accused of being funded by the federal government. But we're working on a shoestring here because all our speaking engagements are done with no speaking fees. I don't make anybody compensate us. I don't make anybody pay us speaking fees or expenses. Everything that we do is out of pocket, which is one of the things that Liberty First University is going to help us do, reach more people that way. But people don't realize that there's a passion to be had for the cause that we have. And I think they look at the way we do things and they think, well, nobody would sacrifice that much to do that. She must be getting money from somewhere else. But I can tell you most publicly, I've never received a check. And when it comes time to pay bills, it would be nice to get one, but I'm not getting them. But these are the kind of passions that will be inspiring the people when they get to know the truth and they know how powerful they really are. And I really, really, really believe that we're making a difference. In the last 5 years, the Supreme Court, in their opinions, have quoted the founders of our Constitution more than I've seen them quote them in the last 150 years.
Yeah. Well,
they do it wrong, mind you. They quote them all wrong and out of context. But at least they know they're trying to speak in the language that we want to hear.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, in the interest of full disclosure, we're going to send you a Liberty Talk Radio coffee cup at the end of this broadcast, okay? So I want everyone to know that we're paying you for being on this program. And by the way, the coffee cup has my picture on it. You'll see me forever. It'll last forever. But what do you do? We have some zombies in the studio who the answer to every single, stop pointing at me. Every single conflict, and I say, this is ridiculous. What are we in this country for? And I get the same answer. It's a zombie answer. They memorize it. To be a zombie, you have to memorize these answers. And they say, that's because we're the world's policemen. I get so befuddled when they say that. I say, you can't possibly have a brain cell working and say that. I'm getting people have been throwing paper at me. But you can't have a brain cell working and say that. You can't, because if you'd be so embarrassed you'd cry yourself to death. How do you, I'm sure you've heard that. How do you respond so I can get these zombies off my back?
Well, it's very simple, actually. The Constitution of the United States is the legal operation of the federal government. So I would say simply, show me the article, section, and clause in the Constitution that authorizes the federal government to be the police force of the world. Because if there is not an article, section, and clause that empowers the federal government to engage in that activity, then they do not have the authority to engage in that activity. It's an unlawful authority.
Yeah. All right. Okay, I'll try that. Hopefully they know how to read. Maybe they don't. I'm not sure at this point because I'm not sure the way they think. But we have a situation now in North Korea. I've read so many freedom websites that talk about North Korea, and they're all basically on the same page as to how to solve the situation in North Korea. I'd love to hear your version.
Well, I don't actually get into political policy from that perspective. We deal exclusively with the Constitution, its history, and its application.
Okay.
So my answer to that question would very simply be, find what authority rests within the federal government through the law that created the federal government and work within those confines. If it is not enumerated as an authority within the Constitution, then the federal government does not have the authority to engage in that activity.
Yeah. Sometimes the response I receive to that is say, well, times have changed and you have to change with the times. The world is a different place. It is not a safe place today. And I go, of course. We're bombing everyone. It's, no matter where you are, you have a good chance of getting a bomb thrown on your head, and it's usually made in America. So you're right in that regard. But they actually believe that.
But no, it's not right. It's an incorrect. It's a false premise, actually.
Right. Absolutely.
what I would love for people who believe that, I would love them to go through my History of the Constitution course. It's called the Genealogy of the Constitution, where I start in the history of our Constitution from the year 1014 and move forward to 1789. And what everyone who attends this course understands is that history always repeats. It's not a matter of not knowing your history that causes it to repeat. History always repeats. Right. But those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat its mistakes. Right. We were not any less violent then than we are now. Anybody who knows anything about ISIS should know about the Barbary pirates. Right. And just because we have more powerful weapons, relatively speaking, we had very powerful weapons then. Things that evoked fear in the hearts of men back then. And that's basically what we're talking about here, things that evoke fear in the hearts of people, this kind of destruction. And so they had to deal with these things. They've been dealing with these things since men created government in the very beginning. And so to say that these are different times is to be ignorant of history and to be ignorant of human nature, because there is no brave new world. Yeah. We are not experiencing anything new or novel. We are just simply repeating the same old scenarios with different people and different players.
All right. If anyone in my studio would agree to take your class, I will pay for it out of my own pocket.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
No, I would.
I
would. I just, because I can't get through to them, because they go, oh, yeah, we know what you're going to say. They're still throwing paper at me, by the way. I have such friendly people here. Well, there's friendly zombies here. But how would you characterize...
The truth is so powerful. It really is. And it is absolutely life-changing. Right. I can tell you, I teach the genealogy of the Constitution as a 75-minute course on the road when I go and teach it at meetings. And I have had people come to me after learning just 75 minutes saying this was life-altering. Right. I've had people who have PhDs in American history, Supreme Court justices on the state level, people who have master's degrees and PhDs in political science tell me they learned more in that 75 minutes than they did in their entire education. And that's something that we need to realize. I don't want anybody to come to the course if they're not willing to open their mind and learn. Because if you come and you're just combative to what you're doing, all you're doing is setting your precepts into stone, and it's not going to help anybody.
Yeah. You know, we on this program, I'm very fortunate to have people that are nationally, internationally known. Many of them are multimillionaires, some are even billionaires, and there's one thing they have in common, almost universally. Born in the United States, but not living here anymore. That's got to tell you something. I mean, these people don't move out of the United States because someplace else is a nicer place. They see what's happening to this country, and they don't want to be part of it when it eventually comes to fruition, which I'm afraid may be coming to the situation soon, with our economic situation being as bad as it is, although the mainstream media paints it as being a euphoric situation.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because I have a large, diverse audience when I'm teaching. And especially as I teach this History of the Constitution class, I have had people who have come up to me after that class, immigrants from Austria, from Cuba, you know, from all over the world, who have come to me literally in tears and saying, you know, I don't know where to go. I left this, and I'm watching it happen. I had one man come to me from Cuba. He said, you know, if things keep going this way, I'm going to go back to Cuba and wait out the turmoil. I don't want to live through another transition from liberty to communism. I don't want to live through that. I had a man from Austria tell me, he said, you know, I saw this coming. He said, when in Austria, I felt like I was living in the middle of a train crash. He says, but here in America, I see the train crash coming, and I'm screaming, and I can't stop it from happening. And these people are telling me these things as tears are running down their eyes.
Yeah. Even my wife said, she said, you know, we're getting on in years. I know I seem like I'm only 16 or 18 years old. I'm a little older than that. But, and my wife never thought this way before, but she says, where are we going to live? I said, what do you mean? And she says, aren't we moving? Even my wife, and she doesn't get involved in this stuff. And I tell you, if I went home tonight and I said, we're moving to Ecuador, Singapore, you name it, New Zealand, I mean, she'd be packed in a New York minute. We have a telephone? We have a caller in? What area code?
417.
All right, area code 417. You're on the air. Your question or comment, please.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Yes, your question or comment,
Fantastic,
please.
thank you.
Yeah, I had a question.
About the Barbary pirate situation that you were talking about earlier.
When you talk about
the
Barbary pirates,
and what happened there,
doesn't that kind of
defend the idea of interventionism, at least to an extent? And I know you say we're not supposed to be the policemen of the world.
How do we deal with foreign threats as a country then?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that because I don't see that it's the same kind of thing. So what we had in the beginning, and even before we created these United States, we had the Barbary pirates actually coming on our coast and kidnapping people and enslaving them and engaging them in the slave trade. And so we had to stop that. Most people aren't aware that we actually, through the British government, paid a tribute to the Barbary pirates to keep them at peace. And it was Jefferson who stepped up and said, long before he was president, you know what, we got to stop paying these people and we got to defend our people from this attack. Somebody probably would try to apply Jefferson's sending of ships to Tripoli as an intervention, but in reality it was not. It was not an invasion. What Jefferson was doing by sending ships was protecting our trade routes. And so we had a commerce trade, and the ships were not there to attack the land. They were there to protect the ships in the trade routes. So it wasn't in application like we are today, going over and fighting other countries' battles. As a matter of fact, both Washington and Jefferson were vehemently opposed to becoming engaged in other people's civil wars. But it was a matter of defending our commerce and our property as it moved across the sea.
Okay, all right.
Can I
Good
ask
answer.
one more question
Good
in
answer.
that vein?
Sure.
In that vein?
Okay, one of the things in the French Revolution that I'd be curious about in terms of your opinion on isolationism or what have you, it seems to me like whenever we tried to stay out of the French Revolution, we kind of ticked everybody off. Like the British were mad at us because we were trading with the French, and French were mad at us we were trading with the British. And it seems like we don't make allies of isolationism. It seems like exactly the opposite. It seems like if we end up ticking everybody off because we won't interact with anybody at all.
Well, I believe you're using that term isolation as inappropriately. I don't think that anybody is talked about isolation here. It's about proper constitutional policy, and I don't think we're talking about a matter of isolationism. And simplifying the French Revolution is, I think what you're doing is also oversimplifying the French Revolution. You know, one thing that we don't do in America enough of is we don't read Thomas Paine's book, The Rights of Man, which is all about the French Revolution and that interaction. A lot of what we understand about the French Revolution, in spite of our independence from Great Britain, was British propaganda being spread in America. And Paine gives a whole nother side of the story to the French Revolution. What I would say is that by not getting involved in the French Revolution, you will notice throughout history that we were not attacked by Britain and we were not attacked by France. The attack that Great Britain brought across America in 1812 was not about any isolationism. It was about the British government refusing to recognize our independence from them. Most people don't realize that even though we went ahead with creating these United States and the Constitution, that period of time between our first victory of freedom from Great Britain and the end of the War of 1812 was actually a period where Great Britain still considered us their property. They kept coming and stealing our resources offshore. They were making our American men serve in their navy. And so we had a lot of different conflicts there with Great Britain, and I think like I said, the short answer is that's an oversimplification and something that can't be addressed in just simply a few minutes.
Okay, you said Thomas Paine's The Right of Men, Rights of Men?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, I will read that. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, no, oh man, I tell you what, to be honest with you, as a teacher, I keep learning. And I picked up that book and I kept saying to my husband, holy cow, why weren't we ever taught this about the French Revolution? Why weren't we ever taught that? See, Paine was living in France at the time of the French Revolution, and we had a parliamentarian in Great Britain sending out all this propaganda, and Paine's book, The Rights of Man, is actually an apologetic answer to the British propaganda being spread about the French Revolution. Now, obviously, Paine has a vested interest, so you have to read both sides and understand where the truth is in the middle. But I think the one thing that Paine's book did tell me is that I haven't been learning the truth.
Okay. KrisAnne, I want to thank you so much. Boy, we've taken more of the time. This has been fascinating. I think we can stay on for hours. I hope you will consider Liberty Talk Radio sort of like Liberty Talk Radio University, an annex of Liberty First University. How about that?
That would be great. You guys, you know how to get in contact with me. I've already, we've done this before, and I already told Janet that I love this forum, and I love you guys. I love talking to you. You have a great audience. You're a great host, and I'll do this whenever you want, so just give me a call.
Okay, thank you. Let me give you the last minute to wrap things up, tell people how they can reach you, a little bit about the university, how they can enroll, however you want to close it out. I'll leave it up to you.
Okay, well, we have Liberty First University, which is at libertyfirstuniversity.com. You can, like I said, it's self-paced. There is a subscription fee. We have a reduced fee for students, high school and college students. So if you're a grandma going to college, you still get a reduced fee. And it's self-paced. You don't have to go to any university. And the wonderful thing is these classes are, like I said, free of the revision and the government propaganda, but they're also delivered in a way that everybody understands them. You got to think, I wrote this so that even a middle school student could take these classes and understand, but still then the guy with the PhD in American history finds it addictive, right? So what we have here is an expansion, is an attractive display of truth and history that is accessible to everyone. We are adding new courses every couple weeks. We just added a course on the power of the purse just in time for all the congressional lies about the new budget crisis that's coming out, so we can be educated and actually tell our congressmen stop lying to us and give us a budget. We will have upcoming courses on the history of America and slavery. We have a course coming up on state sovereignty. We even have a course that my husband is teaching on the Christian's obligation to be involved in government, which has a lot of misapplication today. He taught this class one time called The Christian's Duty to Disobey the Government. So it's a very, it's a really, really fun class. We have lots of great things coming in the future. LibertyFirstUniversity.com. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. You can find me at KrisAnneHall.com. I've written 5 books. I have children's books. I have DVDs. We have so many resources out there just because we want to help you take back the narrative. All right.
We wish you all the luck in the world, and America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly and talk radio endorses you.
Yay! Thank you.
Thank you so much. Until we see you again, good luck. And
thank you.
So
blessings.
much. Bye-bye. Folks, this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, as my wife would say, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well. Stay tuned.
Love